Austin, Wilkinson. I'd like to give a thanks to Bishop Roy Rodriguez, the Christ the Healer Church, for making this possible. I'm here with my grandfather, Larry Wilkinson. He's been here a few times. I'd like to share with you something that has really helped me as a Christian with my walk and making the right choices. The Lord showed me there's three paths that each person has access to. There's the path of evil, which is where you find sin and death. There's a path of just you, yourself, selfishness, self-centeredness. And there's a path of life. It's God's path, the Christian path. And in every moment, we find ourselves against circumstances that you have to make a decision on. And whatever decision you make determines the path that you're on. You make the decision the devil wants you on, you end up on his path. If you choose a self-centered decision, you end up on the middle path. You make God's choice, you end up on his path. So how does this look? God will present, in every situation, in every circumstance, God will present you with an option. But the devil also wants to present you with options. The devil will throw a whole lot of them to scatter, to make it confusing, to mix it up. And so for a non-believer in encountering these circumstances, they don't know the best option to pick because they don't know the future. They don't know what might seem good may not be good at all. It might have a bad outcome. What seems right to a man is not always right to God. And so when you make a choice, let's say you pick that self-centered option, you're going to ride that middle. You're not necessarily doing anything evil, but you're also not doing anything good. The problem with the self-centered is it leans more towards the evil route. The enemy has more opportunities to get you. The enemy can't get you if you're walking with God. He can only get you when you're living for yourself. And this is where it gets interesting. God can reach you if you're living for the enemy. He can get you no matter where you're at. If you make a decision where you live for the devil, okay, you make a bad decision, let's say you need some money. Instead of working a few extra hours, you decide to go steal it from somebody. Well, now you're living with the devil. In each path, you have to live a certain way to exist in there. There are curses and blessings that come with them. There's only blessings when it comes to walking with Christ, but there's sacrifices. There are no blessings living for the devil. There are only curses disguised as blessings. Living for yourself, you can get a kind of a mixture of both. When you live for God and you make His choices, you walk the path up to the right. Let's say you asked for help. And not only did they help you, but they didn't loan that money to you, they gave it to you. And so what does a Christian do when they're faced with these circumstances? Well, a Christian prays. They ask God, please guide my steps. Where do I go from here? I don't know all the outcomes. And God will lead you to the right one. And it may be one that doesn't make any sense. That's why God says, do not lean upon your own understanding. Because you don't know. You can't know all possible outcomes. Let me give a couple examples. I like examples personally. Let's say you're walking down the street and you see a homeless man who's hungry. Now, before I was saved, I would just walk on by them. I would ignore them. That's selfishness. Some people, they mock them. They yell at them, they scream at them, they tell them to get away. They're very mean to them. That'd be the path of the devil. What will God want us to do? God would want me to go right back and feed this person. It requires a sacrifice from me. I have to take that which I earned and give it to someone who didn't earn it, who's done nothing more than be in trouble in a bad spot. But as a Christian, that's where God leads me. That's what God would have me do. And if I pray, that's what He says to do. And there have been times that this has happened. Let's take another. Let's say your child's very sick, okay? And you need money for an important surgery. And you can get a second job. You can work more hours than when you're at. You can sell what you have. You can go steal. Maybe you go sell drugs. Maybe you ask for some help. And this is a tough place for a lot of people. Christians, again, are going to pray. And God might say, do this or do that. And what's great about leaning on God is He always knows the outcomes. The outcomes tend to always be good. It always ends up working in your favor. He promises that many times throughout His Word. I'll work for good for you. So, this is what separates us from everybody else. But we're not called to just live a life where we live through our circumstances and benefit from them. We're called to serve, to bring those who don't see the way and help show them the way. So who are we talking about? It's important to understand the mind of those that don't walk with Christ, the minds of ourselves before we do. One type of person that I encounter a lot, and this was a lot of me, was show me that God's real. I don't see him. And this person has lived a life of encountering their circumstances and always seeing bad outcomes and wondering, if there's a God that loves like you Christians say he does, why am I living my life this way? Why? I don't want the bad outcomes. I want to do good and what is right, but I can't seem to get it. And so it doesn't make sense to them that God exists. They just don't understand that God will control your steps for you. They choose anatomy, and they choose to decide for themselves what is right and wrong. The problem is you can't know the outcome of something unless you can tell what the future is on something. You can't guarantee the outcome of anything. I can't control my next breath, let alone determine what's going to happen tomorrow. You got to lean on God for that. And at first, when I came to Christ, it didn't make sense to me how that could work, but I tried it. I just went on faith, and it's consistently worked every time. The only time I ended up in a bad place is if I made a bad decision, if I ignored what God said to do for the sake of my own desires or chasing after my own heart. It's important for these people that you show them the love of Christ. You show them how he is. Maybe you pray with them, and God tells you what to do, and you say, hey, I think you should go with this option. And maybe they don't see God right away, but over time they're going to learn, wow, I go to my friend, and she prays for me. And every time she tells me what to do, it works out. And she says she just talks to Jesus every time. And now they're going to get led to the Lord. It's simple. You don't have to prove that God's real using logic, math, or science, or anything. You just have to show them. They just want to see it. Another kind of person, they go after what they want. And they're worried that when they go towards God, when they walk with his path, that God's going to take all that from them because they recognize it's not all good. Maybe they're deceitful at work. Maybe they don't work so hard. Perhaps they've done so much bad in the past. They're worried or afraid that God's going to judge them so badly for those things. And the enemy gets you trapped and makes you afraid. And again, it's just a person, a human being faced with difficult circumstances, and we're making the best decisions that seem right to us. We don't know any better. And it's the same for them as with anybody else. What do they need? The same thing. Just show them God. When just talk to them, be their friends. Why God says love even your enemies. Your enemies just don't understand. You want to get rid of your enemy, bring them to Jesus. They become your best friend. They become your brother, your sister. So you pray with them. Perhaps they're in a bad spot. Maybe there's a gang war and they're stuck in the middle of it and they just want to know how to get out of it. And you pray and you take what Jesus told you and you share with them. Christ will work through you to reach him. That's what a lot of this is about. Christ working through us. He gave his flesh so that our sin can be moved out of the way. And then he can use our bodies to serve him. And so instead of having one body, one life, living a human lifespan, he works through all people as one body. And now all these people can be saved. What about Christians? As it speaks in a lot in the Bible, not about the non-believers, but about believers that get it wrong, that think they will go to heaven, and they instead go to hell. Whenever you see weeping and gnashing of teeth, that's not a people that believe they thought they'd make it. Or that is, it's not people who sinned and never gave their life to Christ. The weeping, I thought I had it right. Lord, I thought I did right. I served you, and then I didn't get it right. Or gnashing of teeth, believing God's a credit card. And they believed all these worldviews of God, and not one of them was true. So how do you reach them? Again, you show them with love. You live with them. Their lives aren't going to be perfect reflections. They're putting on a mask. They're putting on a front. They want you to see this front. And they want you to believe through your eyes that they're going to be saved. They have to believe it themselves. Think of it as a jail cell. The enemy's got it in the door wide open. And the enemy makes it really comfortable in that jail cell for them. But little do they know, they're in a cell. And when they die, that's the moment the devil can lock the gate and they can't get out. It's very important we reach these people. More important that we reach them than the non-believers, though they all are very important. Because those that believe but believe falsely will go out and teach falsely and lead more astray. They can take a little one that believes in God with all their heart and is aimed to do good, and they're not stumbling wrong, and then they go listen to this preacher. And they're told that God's going to make you a millionaire. And then they believe it. And then they pursue money. God says you can't have two masters. You can't serve money and God. It's impossible. So what's the teaching on that? This is one that I had to come to terms with. For I know people that pursue money. A master is someone that dictates what you do, how you do it, when, where, all those things. You are a slave to it. If I want to go do something, I think, oh, I don't have the money for that. If I think, oh, I'm going to move over here and serve the Lord, I don't have the money. My money says I don't have what I need. But that's what it means by you can't serve your money. You got to be wise with what God's giving you, but it can't be what determines how you live your life. You choose to serve the Lord and work with the Lord. You think, well, I prayed and God says to go do this. I don't have the money, but I'm going to go do it because God said to. And and every single time, if God says to do it, you're going to have what you want. God doesn't give you what you need before you need it. It's only when you reach your hand out and grasp for it that you'll find that it's there. Many times, just coming out here, I needed something for my job in order to get permission to go. I had half of what I needed. And my grandfather calls and says, I've heard from the Lord. He says to put in your time to leave for work so you can come here to the Philippines with me. The Lord said you'll be approved. I went to apply this. I had half of what I needed. But when I went to put it in, I suddenly had all that I needed, plus a little extra. I don't know how that happened other than God. There's no other way. I saw it with my own eyes, God providing me what I needed where I fell short. I just moved on faith. And it's always worked out for me. I'm going to share some testimonies about my life and how I've come to the Lord. And some circumstances that I've faced to hopefully encourage you to do the same. Before I came to God, I wouldn't think I was a terrible person. I tried to do good for people. I tried to be really nice and harmonious. But I didn't succeed at that too much. I ended up just hiding away at home. I did a lot of drugs. I spent pretty much all of my time high. I was not sober all that often. I pursued money. And with the money that I earned, I didn't take care of my family. You know, God says that you have to take care of your family. You're worse than an infidel if you don't. You have to provide, especially as the man, as the husband. It's something I must do. And I didn't. I spent it all on drugs or going out to have fun, spending it on video games and toys. None of it was spent on my wife or my family. My wife's trying to go to school. She's working really hard at that, and she has to pull back to go get a job. I go get a job, I spend all that money. I decide not to get a job, I go work for myself because I don't want someone telling me what to do or what I can and cannot smoke. And that wasn't fair to her. And then one day, there's this guy I worked with. I worked for him for free because I was building a relationship. That's important when you're running a business. And he calls me up and he says, Austin, I want you to come out to where I'm at. I'd like to sit and talk with you. He didn't say what on, he just said, I just want to talk. And he's the owner of a multi-million-dollar company. And I was so excited. I thought, wow, all right, I'm going to go make more money working for this guy. This is all about me making money. He wants to give me an offer. Because that's what I was thinking at the time. And mind you, I already had a really good job. I stumbled into one by accident. I'll get to that here in a second. So I drive out 2 hours away. And when I woke up that morning, I determined I'm not going to get high right now. I actually was sober this whole day, and that never happened. It felt wrong to me all of a sudden to smoke and to get high. So I went over to the city, and I sat down with them, and I was excited, I was eager. All right, I have all my business ideas and all my talk. And he goes, talk to me about your family. And I share with him my grandfather, who's anointed by God and serves him. And so he starts talking about God with me. He recognizes that I have a blessing that I haven't taken on. And it's weird, we spoke for 3 hours, and he never challenged me, he never questioned me. He spoke to me where I was at. He didn't make me feel insignificant or wrong in any way. He just asked me questions, and he would work with me. I would talk about aliens and UFOs and all these really silly things that I believed in. And he would work with it. He'd roll with it. But then when he was done rolling with it, he would inject his ideas. And he said, well, what about God and this? And I said, I don't really know. I mean, I see this and that. I don't really know what to think. And my big problem was I didn't believe God's word was true. I didn't believe that. I didn't think there was any way humans could write a book to quantify who God is and what he is. I didn't think that was possible if he's so much greater. And he challenged me when it came down to, do I think God exists? He says, how do you know? How do you know that he exists? And that rang with me. I finished our meal. We had a pleasant time together, and I went home. By the way, we did not once talk about work. Not once. He just thanked me for the work that I did. That's all. And I went home. I sat in my backyard. I hung out with my wife and her family. They all went inside. I had my drugs sitting right next to me. It was dark out, I remember. This was September, just a couple years ago. It was a Sunday. And I was sitting in my backyard, and I think, okay, if God's real, I don't have to pretend. When I talk to him, he's going to respond to me in a way that I know he's real. And whether it's a word or something going on around me. And so I pray. And it's a very similar prayer that any of you can pray. God told me I'm not special. I'm not some superhuman being. I'm just a normal, everyday, flesh and blood person such as you. And I said, God. And I spoke slowly. I paused to give him a chance to say anything at any point he wanted. And I spoke as if he was real. I didn't believe yet, but I gave him all my hope, all my faith that he was real. And when I said God, just saying that, every hair on my body stood up like electricity was passing through me. Kind of shocked me, but I blew it off as coincidence at the time. And I told him I'm a very angry and anxious person. I'm full of fear and anger, and I've tried everything. I do drugs. I've tried getting him from the doctors. I've gotten him off the streets. Nothing is helping. I told him, if you take these two things from me, if you take these two from me, then I'll serve you. I'll give you my life. You own me. I will do nothing else other than you. You will be my everything. And I sat for a second, and I said, amen. I had my head bowed, kind of like this. And then all of a sudden, I felt right here, something pulled out of me. It was like, I didn't notice whatever was pulled out of me. I didn't know it was there. But when it was gone, it was like there was all this pressure, and then it just released, and it felt amazing. But that wasn't even the best part. My head shot up like this, and I took my breath. I was taking these deep breaths, and all of a sudden, I felt something just poured into me. And it was like when you're really cold and you cuddle up and you get warm, that warm euphoria, you get over yourself. That's what I felt. And at that moment, I fell to my knees, sobbing, crying. It was more than I can handle. It was beautiful. It was like, it's not even close, but the closest comparison I can get, if there's a woman that you love, and you love so much, and you've just devoted after her all these years, and she's never said, I love you. And then in just one moment, she turns to you and says, I love you. That hit, that emotion, that's what it was like, but so much more than that. I was on the ground for a few minutes, sobbing, crying my eyes out, just felt amazing. I felt fresh. I felt clean. Like my soul just got its teeth brushed. It was amazing. And I look over at my drugs, and for the first time in a year and a half, I hated them. And I never went back. And they're gone. And I go inside, and my wife's looking at me, just concerned, and I say, I'm all right, I'm okay, it's all fine, I've had a moment. And she said, okay, she didn't understand. And I laid down on her couch. I went to sleep. For 2.5 years, I didn't sleep well. I struggled to sleep maybe 3 or 4 hours a night. It was very rough. I was always tired. Part of why I did drugs was to sleep. 45 minutes, my wife woke me up to go, taking me upstairs. Again, concerned because I had drooled all over the pillow. I had the imprint of the pillow on me. I was snoring. I felt like I slept hours. I suddenly got all this rest. And that's how I came to Christ. And that's how I was baptized in the Holy Spirit all in one moment. And so much followed too. I had this this task at my job. I'll go into a couple testimonies here. I was given this important job to do at work, and I didn't know how to solve it. Our best and brightest minds, people way smarter than me, and still are smarter than me, couldn't solve it. It's been an unsolvable problem for 4 years, but it was solved one time. But the guy who solved it left, and the solution broke. And so I spent a few days trying to figure this out. And this was the week I found Christ, the week I gave my life to him. And I'm tired. The night before, I used to smoke cigarettes, and he had me quit. And so this was the first full day of me quitting. I did not sleep the night before because I was withdrawing. I wanted my nicotine, and I wouldn't get any. So I was dead tired. And I'm trying to solve the problem, and it won't work. I was at it for 4 hours, and I go outside, and I begin to pray. Because I had just read in the Bible, and he says, ask and it will be given. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be open to you. And so I thought, okay. And there's another part, I don't know it word for word, but it goes with, if you ask and you believe, it can be yours. So I went out there, and I know that it's not, you don't ask for money and things. You ask for solutions to your problems. You look towards a circumstance, right? And I pray and I say, Jesus, please help me. Help me solve this problem. I have no idea what I'm doing. I am so tired. I'm going to go in there and you take control. Since this is your body, you can take control. I'm testing one of his promises, something I recommend, by the way. Don't put God to the test, but he's got promises he wants you to use. I go in there, I have this giant board, and I grab this marker, and I'm barely standing. This is how tired I am. And I take my marker, and I begin to draw out the solution to my problem. And I'm just drawing whatever comes to mind. I write stuff out. I don't know what I wrote, but I wrote some math equations. I drew a couple of graphs. None of it made sense to me. It looked like it was written in some foreign language no one's seen. But I knew I was done with it. I put the marker down, I stood back and said, great, I have no idea what any of that means. So I sat down, and I get on my computer, and I get ready to create the solution based on what I drew. And again, I pray to God, you're going to have to take the reins on this one. I don't know what I'm doing. And I began working, and about 20 minutes later, I finish what it was. I run it, it works perfectly. It took a 4-hour process that we used to do at work and broke it down into 15 seconds. And it's still the only solution we have to this problem. We still use it to this day, and I don't think anyone could do better. Another circumstance, and I'll tie it up with this one. And this involves my wife, and if you're dealing with non-believers, this is useful. Because you'll come across this a lot, especially amongst your friends and family. My car broke down. We have one car. My wife uses it to get to school and back, and she uses it to run our errands. And she went to school, and it wouldn't start. Thankfully, she had a friend with her at the same time. Her dad was picking her up. So she was able to get home. She gets home freaking out. Austin, our car's broke down. We don't have any money. It won't start. I turned the key and nothing. And so I said, don't worry. God will take care of us. I was actually rejoicing because I was excited for this opportunity to see what God's going to do about this. Because I did not believe God was going to leave me with nothing. I don't believe he'll give me 2 cars, but I don't think he'll give me less than 1. I got to have at least that. And so I told her, watch, it's all going to be okay. So we call our mechanic, and she's worried about the price of parts. And I take all the money we have, and I say, this will be enough. If we have to, we'll use all that we have. It's okay, but only as God says. So we call the tow company. Instead of costing us $100-something, it cost us only $10. It's a very good price. So they tow our car over to the mechanic. And I talked to the mechanic, and he said, I'll look it over. The new parts are going to cost about $400, pretty much what I had. And I said, okay, just call me before you buy it to confirm the problem. And so I forget to call the mechanic. About 3 hours go by, and my wife comes home, and she's freaking out. She goes, I don't know, I don't want to spend all this money. We need it for this and all these things. And I said, baby, don't worry. God will take care of us. Watch. Trust me. If I'm wrong, you can yell at me as much as you want. And she said, okay, fine. We'll just see what God does, right? I call the mechanic, and I say, hey, about my car. And he goes, oh, I forgot to call you. Yeah, it was really simple. Something just wasn't plugged in. I'm not going to charge you. I didn't have to spend any money. And I said, thank you. And we got off the phone. I told my wife, and she was blown away. She goes, wow, that's funny. Okay, so we didn't spend anything for the car repair. And she goes, how are we going to get it home? And the thought occurred to me, and this came from God. her mom worked in the area, and her car was broken at the time. And so her mom just took a cab. Instead of going home, she took it just up the road to grab our car and bring it to our house. We didn't have to pay to get towed back. As the car's coming home, my wife goes to the mailbox and checks the mail, and she opens an envelope, and in America, we get these surveys you have to do. They usually pay you $1. There was $13 in there. And she's looking at this, and she's a little thrown off by it. And I said, honey, we had this problem, and where we thought we were going to spend hundreds of dollars, at the end of the day, we made $3. It's not much, but it makes you laugh. And she laughed. And ever since then, whenever life throws a problem at me, throws a circumstance at us, we turn to God. He has never, ever let me down. Not once. A year and a half in, never let me down. And I will stand by him every day for the rest of my life. If you're a believer, I encourage you to go out and do more with your faith. Because there are so many people lost and confused, living these lives they think are great, and it really isn't. It's important that they understand that God is a God of love and relationship. The rules and everything, first he builds a relationship with you, and then he teaches you to walk the path. And walking that path does require rules. I did not plan on quitting drugs when I talked to God, when I gave my life to him. It was a byproduct. I wanted to get rid of it. I wanted to get rid of it more than I wanted to keep it. When I got my circumstances, I wanted to trust in him more than I wanted to freak out and panic. And anytime I've had anything, I've always wanted what he wants more. Now I want to feed the hungry. I want to provide clothes to those who don't have it. Try to find homes for the homeless. I want to help people. And it makes me feel really good to do so. And God provides me what I need to do it. He never leaves you empty-handed. The Bible is full of examples of this. He never leaves you without what you need. Sometimes all you need is strength and courage. Think about the 2 soldiers that went through the enemy camp to bring back a cup of water. All they needed was courage. They didn't need weapons or anything. The enemy's trying to kill them the whole way, and they're going, we got to get him. We got to get that water. He wants this water. It's silly. But God likes to use a silly. And if you don't believe in God, I encourage you, just talk to him. Forget the rules. Those will come later. He'll work those with you himself. Just talk to him. Give him 2 minutes of your time. Tell him what your problems are, your concerns, and ask him for help. He'll work with you. He's a person, just like us. He's just a different kind of person. He exists elsewhere, but he is there, and he's listening always. He wants you. All the time I'm gonna spend here, I'd like to bring my grandfather here, Larry Wilkinson, to spend the rest of the time with you. Thank you.